Imagine being stabbed and sobbing to death with no one coming to your aid. This story of the young Ukrainian girl has been trending, and people can't stop questioning why no one in the train tried to help her or even hold the perpetrator. They all watched him walk away like nothing happened. This is the story of Iryna Zarutska, a 23-year-old who survived bombs in Ukraine only to die alone on a train in America. But what sparked outrage across social media isn't just her death, it's what happened after she was stabbed. The surveillance footage shows something that has shocked millions of viewers and raised disturbing questions about who we've become as a society. Why did nobody help? Why did passengers just sit there? And how did her attacker simply walk away like he hadn't just committed murder in front of dozens of witnesses? Before we delve in, subscribe to our channel if you're a fan of true crime stories so you never miss any of our updates. Now, back to the story. August 22, 2025, Charlotte, North Carolina. The Blue Line light rail train was carrying its usual mix of commuters, workers, and everyday people going about their normal lives. Among them was Iryna Zarutska, a young Ukrainian refugee who had escaped one of the most dangerous places on earth only to find herself in what would become her final moments. Iryna was born in Ukraine and was living a normal life when Russia launched its full-scale invasion in February 2022. Overnight, her world transformed from peaceful normalcy to a war zone where death could come from the sky at any moment. For months, she lived under constant threat. Air raid sirens became the soundtrack of her life. She spent nights in underground shelters, listening to bombs falling above. She watched her country being destroyed and her people being killed by an invading army. But she survived. Against all odds, she made it through the worst that war could throw at her. She made the incredibly difficult decision to leave her homeland and seek safety in America. The journey wasn't easy. Ukrainian refugees faced complex paperwork, long waits, and an uncertain future. Many countries opened their doors, but starting over in a foreign country with a different language and culture presented its own massive challenges. When Iryna finally arrived in the United States, she must have felt incredible relief. No more bombs. No more air raid sirens. No more nights spent hiding underground. She was safe. Default tech, she worked hard to build a new life. She got her work permit, found employment, and began the process of creating a future in her new country. She was doing everything right, following all the rules, contributing to her community. By August 2025, she had been in America long enough to establish routines and start feeling like this could truly become home. She was integrating, learning, and building something positive from the trauma she had experienced. She had survived war. She had survived displacement. She had survived starting over with nothing in a foreign country. What she couldn't survive was the indifference of strangers on a train. The surveillance cameras captured everything. And what they show is more disturbing than the attack itself. It's what happened after that has left people around the world asking uncomfortable questions about human nature. At approximately 11:20 a.m., Iryna boarded the train. She was alone, carrying her belongings, probably thinking about work or the day ahead. She found an empty seat and sat down, just like thousands of other people do on public transportation every single day. Sitting directly behind her was 34-year-old Decarlos Brown, homeless. Without warning, without provocation, Brown pulled out a knife and stabbed Iryna in the neck and back. The surveillance footage shows the sudden violence, Iryna's shock, and then something that has haunted everyone who has seen it. She didn't die immediately. She was conscious, bleeding, and clearly in desperate need of help. This is where the story becomes truly disturbing. What happened next is what has made this case go viral for all the wrong reasons. As Iryna lay dying as she bled and struggled for her life, the other passengers on that train did nothing. They sat in their seats. They watched, but nobody moved to help her. Nobody tried to stop the bleeding. Nobody even called out for help. This isn't speculation or unclear footage. The cameras captured everything in clear detail. Multiple passengers were present. They had phones. They could see what was happening. And they chose to do nothing. The psychological phenomenon known as the bystander effect explains part of this. When multiple people witness an emergency, each person assumes someone else will take action. The more people present, the less likely anyone is to help. It's a well-documented aspect of human psychology that has been studied for decades. But understanding it doesn't make it any less shocking to watch. When portions of this surveillance footage were released and shared on social media, the reaction was swift and furious. Millions of people watched in disbelief as they saw a young woman dying while surrounded by people who could have helped, but didn't. The comment sections exploded with anger, not just at the attacker, but at every single person on that train who witnessed what happened and did nothing. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook were flooded with posts asking the same questions. How could this happen? Where was their humanity? What has happened to our society that people will film someone dying rather than help them? Many users shared their own stories of times they had witnessed emergencies or dangerous situations. Some admitted they had frozen up just like the passengers on that train. Others shared times they had intervened and helped strangers in crisis. The conversation became about more than just one incident. It became about the kind of people we are and the kind of society we live in. To understand why this story has resonated so deeply, you need to know who Iryna was and what she had already survived. She wasn't just any random victim. She was someone who had already overcome incredible odds just to be on that train that day. The details of what Brown did are important to understand, not because they're sensational, but because they help explain why the passenger's inaction was so inexcusable. Brown didn't attack Iryna in a frenzy and then flee the scene. He didn't create chaos that made it dangerous for others to approach. After stabbing her, he simply moved to another seat and sat down calmly. But while the legal system is addressing Brown's actions, there's no law against being a bystander. The passengers who watched Iryna die committed no crime. They violated no statute. They broke no rule except perhaps the most basic one of human decency. This legal reality has frustrated many people following the case. While Brown will face justice for his actions, the people who could have saved Iryna's life but chose not to will face no consequences beyond social media criticism and their own consciences. Some countries have Good Samaritan laws that require people to provide reasonable assistance in emergency situations. But in the United States, there's generally no legal obligation to help a stranger, even when that person is dying right in front of you. Psychologists have studied the bystander effect extensively, and Iryna's case represents a textbook example of how it works. The phenomenon was first identified after the famous Kitty Genovese case in 1964, where a woman was murdered while dozens of people reportedly watched from their apartment windows. Several psychological factors contribute to bystander inaction. First is the diffusion of responsibility. When multiple people are present, each person feels less personally responsible for taking action. Everyone assumes someone else will handle the situation. Second is social proof. People look to others for cues about how to behave. If everyone else is sitting still and not reacting, it creates the impression that maybe the situation isn't as serious as it appears. Third is evaluation apprehension, the fear of being judged by others. People worry about looking foolish, making the situation worse, or putting themselves at risk by intervening. Finally, there's simple shock and disbelief. When something truly unexpected and violent happens, many people freeze up. Their brains struggle to process what they're seeing and determine the appropriate response. All of these factors likely played a role in what happened on that train. But understanding the psychology doesn't excuse the behavior. It explains it, but it doesn't make it acceptable. While Brown awaits his day in court, the passengers on that train have been subjected to a different kind of justice, trial by social media. Videos of the incident have been viewed millions of times, and internet users have been ruthless in their criticism. Some people have tried to identify specific passengers from the footage, leading to concerns about vigilante justice and online harassment. Others have defended the bystanders, arguing that it's easy to judge from behind a screen but much harder to know how you would react in such a shocking situation. The discussion has also highlighted the role of technology in these situations. Several passengers filmed the incident rather than helping, leading to criticism about how smartphones have changed human behavior in emergencies. Are we becoming a society that documents tragedy rather than prevents it? For Ukrainian refugees and immigrants, Iryna's death represents a particularly cruel tragedy. She had already overcome the worst possible circumstances, surviving a war zone and successfully relocating to safety in America. The Ukrainian community has organized memorials and fundraising efforts in Iryna's memory. But they've also expressed frustration and anger at how she died, not just because of Brown's attack, but because of the bystanders' inaction. Many Ukrainian refugees have shared their own experiences of feeling vulnerable and isolated in their new country. They've talked about the additional trauma of losing a community member in such a senseless way, and their concerns about safety in places they thought were secure. The incident has also highlighted the broader challenges facing refugee communities. Even after escaping war zones and reaching safety, they face new uncertainties, new dangers, and sometimes, as Iryna discovered, the indifference of strangers when they need help most. If Iryna's death is going to mean something, it has to serve as a wake-up call about our responsibilities to each other. Her story has sparked conversations about the bystander effect, about moral courage, and about what we owe to strangers in crisis. Some transit authorities have used this case to revamp their emergency response training and to educate passengers about how to help in violent situations. Others have increased security presence on trains and buses. Schools and community organizations have incorporated discussions about the bystander effect into their programs, teaching people to recognize the psychological barriers to helping others and providing strategies for overcoming them. The key lessons from psychological research are clear. If you witness an emergency, you need to take personal responsibility. Don't assume someone else will handle it. Pick a specific person and ask them to call 911. Take charge of the situation instead of waiting for someone else to act. Most importantly, decide now, before you're ever in such a situation, that you will be the person who helps rather than the person who watches. In the end, Iryna Zarutska died twice. First, she was killed by Decarlos Brown's knife. But then she was killed again by the indifference of everyone who watched it happen and did nothing. Her story has become a symbol of something troubling about modern society, our increasing tendency to document rather than participate, to watch rather than act, to assume someone else will handle whatever crisis we're witnessing.